Got so much to be thankful for. I woke up this morning thinking, thank you, Lord, for giving me everything I could ever need and more. I've got so much to be thankful for. Say it again. I've got so much to be thankful for. Hey, the love of God has got me clean, no.
The mission of the University Writing Center at California Baptist University is to cultivate purpose-driven writers, communicators, and influencers. In an increasingly digital and multimedia culture, communicating clearly and persuasively is one of the most essential skills to have in any industry or profession. For 2,500 years, influential thinkers, makers, and leaders were trained in the study of rhetoric, which provided powerful tools to establish credibility, develop arguments, and move audiences. Using these principles of rhetoric, the University Writing Center empowers students to be successful in the classroom, move toward commencement, and prepare for their calling. Each spring, the University Writing Center organizes an annual public lecture with a distinguished professional who embodies its mission. The purpose of the lecture and award is for the CBU community to have an opportunity to engage with an exemplary model of what clear and persuasive writing looks like in the real world. Becoming a purpose-driven writer is not simply about getting a better grade on an assignment, it's about making an impact in our spheres of influence. This year, we welcome Dave Evans, who will offer an answer to one of the most important questions facing students today. How do we design a meaningful life in a world that often measures success only through achievement and performance? We hope that today you will be inspired to become writers who communicate clearly and persuasively to live your purpose.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 2026 University Writing Center's Distinguished Public Lecture and Award. My name is Michael Osachuk and I am the Director of Academic Success here at CBU, and we are so excited to have you with us today. We have an exciting afternoon planned for you. The mission of the University Writing Center is to cultivate purpose-driven writers, communicators, and influencers. Thoughtful writing and clear communication will significantly expand your influence, and the Writing Center exists to help students connect words to action and action to purpose. Our theme this year is Designing a Meaningful Life. This is inspired by Dave Evans' co-authored books, the #1 New York Times best-selling Designing Your Life, and the newly released How to Live a Meaningful Life. In this book, Dave addresses the crisis of meaning in today's culture and challenges readers to apply the designer's mindset that reframes challenges through wonder, coherence, flow, and community. Today, we are excited to have Silicon Valley legend, Dave Evans. Yes, let's hear it for Dave. In just a minute, we will hear from Dave, but before we do, we want to practice the importance of gratitude and thank all those who helped us put this event on. An event like this is not something one can do alone. So we'll start with our friends at Conferences and Events. Thank you all so much for helping us set the scene this afternoon. Thank you to the College of Architecture, Visual Arts and Design, the Department of Modern Languages and Literature, and the CBU Career Center. Dean Dirk Dallas, Dr. Jennifer Tronti, and Lisa Blair, thank you for your partnership and your contributions. We want to thank our many student workers in the Office of Student Success, who so much practiced hospitality in welcoming you all today. Thank you all so much. In the Office of the Provost, thank you to Dr. Grace Brown. Thank you to Dr. Claudia Valdez, and thank you to Genesis Ano for the many ways you support our office and this event. And finally, we wish to express our gratitude to our Provost and Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs, Dr. Chuck Sands. Thank you for partnering with us to make this event a success. I would now like to invite Dr. Sands to come up and welcome you all to this event this afternoon. After his remarks, Director of the CBU Career Center, Lisa Blair, will come to the stage and introduce our 2026 speaker. Dr. Sands.
So good afternoon, everybody. I'm thrilled that you're here. We have many events at a place like CBU, and this has actually become one of my favorites. So I'm really, really glad that you are here. You've already heard a great introduction of Dave. We had a chance to have lunch with him today. What he's going to talk about is really going to be impactful and inspiring to you. But I'm excited about the broader concept of the Writing Center and being a purpose-driven communicator, a writer, and someone who actually wants to have meaning in life. You can see where all of this is connecting. So in my role, I'm really lucky. I get to welcome you, and then I get to sit back and enjoy the fact that we have great students here, great faculty, and really just appreciate you being here today. So thank you so much, and look forward to hearing from Dave. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Dave Evans is a co-founder of the Life Design Lab at Stanford University and an adjunct lecturer in the School of Engineering at Stanford, where he received his BS and MS in mechanical engineering. And he's led the design team that created the very first Apple mouse and co-founded the video game company Electronic Arts. I know I was honored and thrilled when Dr. Sung invited me to introduce our guest today because his work has not only impacted me personally, his book, Designing Your Life, has sparked a shift in our own career center at CBU. As we approach that professional development here at the Career Center, it's become our goal to move from a transactional to a very transformational approach to career development by embracing design thinking, which helps students explore passions beyond majors and build resilient careers with who they want to become. So would you join me in welcoming Mr. Dave Evans?
Hey, everybody. So, a little confession. I just hate these kind of introductions. Because they're talking about that. I can't wait to meet this guy. Who is this guy that they're talking about? Oh, that's me. Shoot. Okay, I got to deliver. One of our rules at the Life Design Lab is you prototype your way through life by setting the bar low and clear it. And of course, in order to impress you all, the organizers set the bar really high. Now I have to clear it. So we're talking about finding your way, the challenge of meaning making at and after being here at CBU. So that was my partner, Bill Burnett. We wrote this book called Designing Your Life 10 years ago. Became this worldwide bestseller, sold a couple million copies in 29 languages. That seemed to go pretty well. We trained about 6,000 educators in 600 universities, serving 10 million students worldwide. We've trained over 1,000 coaches. We wrote a second book about how to design your career. Turns out the largest single expression of human energy is in the workplace, and the number one place people find meaning is in the workplace. So that seemed like an appropriate thing to do. And we kind of thought we were done. 2 books, a couple million, we're good, right? And so no, we had to write another book. We wrote a book on how to live a meaningful life, a pretty different sounding book. Now, why did we do that? And first, let me check in. Now, by the way, I talk fast. Is that too fast for you? No. Good. I wasn't going to slow down anyway. I just wanted to know. But nonetheless, so why do we write this book? Well, it turns out because there's a problem. We're user-centered designers, and what we heard was that people got stuck. They got stuck. Now, no cows are actually harmed in making the slide, but nonetheless, they're stuck on this question of meaning making. In fact, not only are they stuck on it, you could argue now that we're really in a crisis of meaning, that this is going on broadly. And how did this come to light? Well, it came to light because we kept hearing from people over and over again, it's just not working for me. This took off particularly after the pandemic. And massively after what's called the Great Resignation, that you may or may not have noticed a couple of years ago, 52 million people walked off the job with nothing in hand. After the pandemic, people are saying, look, we've just been through this existential crisis. I know somebody who died, I nearly did myself, and everybody had this moment to go, wait a minute, what am I doing with my life anyway? If life is short and I really am finite, and that many people died involuntarily way too soon, it got your attention, like, what am I doing? And people said, I need something more. This isn't good enough. And they jumped and walked off. Now, I don't know how many of them landed in a better place. I'm afraid a lot of them jumped from the pan into the fire, but nonetheless, what we see here is a really strong motivation. Now you start bringing that into, past millennials, you go into, Gen Z, and iGen and Gen Alpha, and increasingly it's really got to be more meaningful because I'm not putting up with this nonsense like my grandparents did for any period of time at all. And this, it's not working for me, voiced itself in two particular ways. Number one, I need to find a way to make a bigger impact. I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. I want to make a dent. I want to leave a legacy. I want to matter. We heard that overwhelmingly. And then second, behind that, we heard, I'm just not as fulfilled as I thought. I read all the books, Dave and Bill, and we tried the stuff and it worked pretty well, but it's still not really working for me. It turns out designing your life is one thing. Living that life in a way that you get the joy and the purposefulness out of it is another. So he said, apparently we're onto something here. Maybe we ought to be addressing these problems. Now in design, you start with problem finding. Problem finding precedes problem solving. Half the time your project fails is because you're working on the wrong thing. Most people's bias about the wrong answer is embedded in the way they ask the question. So we wanted to drop back and say, well, what's wrong with this impact problem and this fulfillment problem? So the impact problem. First of all, impact is a thing, it's an outcome. Okay, I wrote a bestseller, we've sold a couple of million copies. That's a real impact. Except it's a thing, and you're not a thing, you're a live, dynamic person. In fact, here at CBU, we actually think you're literally an expression of the reality of the mystery called God. That's where your life comes from. And not only is it a thing versus a person, often it fails. You do everything right, you work really, really hard on a worthwhile outcome, and it may not work. Doing everything right is not a guarantee of success. And that's pretty frustrating. And even when it does work, the glow is short-lived. I worked with the US Olympic Committee at their request to assist athletes after the games deal with the incredible depression that arrives now what? I worked with a group called Elite Meet, who are a bunch of veterans in the Special Forces, so SEALs, Top Gun pilots, Green Berets. These people are the best in the world at what they do. They retire at 42. They're usually going in at the age of 20 or 22, work for 20 years for the government, retire out with a full pension at 42. Now what do I do? The distance from the top of the Olympic platform to dumpster diving is surprisingly short. Nothing as exciting as going up those steps or as terrifying as coming back down. So the glow of impact does not last very long, which means what do I need to do? I guess I need to do more of it. I need to do it again. And that puts you on this never enough treadmill. In fact, there's a part of your body, the addiction cycle, which is easily activated by this thing called the hedonic treadmill. The treadmill where hedonism or pleasure seeking or satisfaction seeking keeps you going all the time. How much of this thing that you're seeking do you need? A little bit more. And a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. And there's never enough. And impact is that sort of a thing. To the point we're now asking the question, is meaning the new money? What do we mean by that? Well, in capitalism in particular, for those of you who are going to go into the marketplace, there have been two primary engines of the hedonic treadmill. What are the things in the business world, in the marketplace, that everybody needs a little bit more of, endlessly? Money and power. How much money is enough? A little bit more. How much power is enough? A little bit more. Now those two engines have worked really well. They're not always nice, but they certainly have kept capitalism going. What we're now observing is the question, particularly in people under 35, as they're rising up through professional ranks, what senior leaders tell us in organizations is what they're asking for is not so much money and power, they're asking for meaning. And they want more of it and more of it and more of it, because we're looking for meaning in the form called impact. How am I making an impact? How am I making a difference? A good thing to want, but insufficient. It's not enough. Oh, by the way, do we do any of that here at CBU? Well, hey, your talent is a gift from God. What you do with it is your gift to Him. Live your purpose. It's a lovely thing to say, but now not only do you want to make a difference, apparently God wants you to make a difference too. And so what you do with it is your gift to Him. And for most people, I think that phrase, what you do with it, is what impact you make with it, is your gift back to Him. Now, by the way, I think the people who made that billboard and the people I've met in leadership here at CBU are thinking more broadly than that. But I'll bet for many of you or for many of your friends, it's really all about, have you done enough yet? So impact is a big thing we talk about here at CBU. Even when we don't talk about it, we talk about it. That's the impact problem. Now the fulfillment problem. Well, who doesn't want to be fulfilled? That seems like a reasonable thing to go for. Is it or is it not? Now, why do we all think fulfillment is so cool? Well, we know how we think about fulfillment because we've been talking about it ever since 1943 when this guy published his first paper. Abraham Maslow, who created this thing called the hierarchy of needs. The apex of which, the peak of the human experience, according to Abraham Maslow, is self-actualization. What is self-actualization? It refers to the desire to become more and more of what one is, to become everything that one is capable of becoming. That's in the original 1943 paper that started this idea. Now, by the way, this idea is really popular. According to the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, this is one of the most contagious, one of the stickiest ideas in the social sciences that was ever published. People have been talking about it ever since 43. It's coming up on a century, for heaven's sakes. Only problem is it's wrong. It's wrong because we certainly at the Life Design Lab at Stanford after 20 years, and frankly, any common sense person will tell you, every single one of you contains far more aliveness, far more personhood, far more potential than one lifetime will permit you to live out. There's more than one of you in there. So, if you have decided that you want to become fulfilled, and by fulfilled you mean every part of you has to come out into the world in some sort of an expression to become all that you could be, as Maslow has instructed us, and everybody seems to have bought in, and you can't get there from here because you're not going to live 9 times longer than you are, you just decided you have a moral obligation to be depressed. That's a bad policy to have. You can't be fulfilled the way most people think fulfillment actually exists. So that's a really bad idea. So it's time to think different. Time to think like a designer, which means in the first case, we want to reframe these ideas. I haven't got time to give you a semester's flyover of what design thinking is, but the first thing we do is we reframe problems to accomplish 2 things. Number 1, to describe reality as accurately as possible, because all the cool stuff happens in this place called reality, not in the place called should, or the place called magical thinking, or the place called what I had in mind. It happens in this place called what actually is happening, called reality. So the first thing we want to do is reframe for reality, and we want to reframe in reality with as generative and as freedom-inducing a possibility as we can come up with. So what are we going to do? How are we going to reframe this impact problem? Well, if you've got all your meaning-making eggs in your impact basket, that's the one thing you're looking for, and that's the strongest answer we heard from everybody, then you're going to end up on the never enough treadmill, because impact will by itself never be enough. So we don't want that. So how do we reframe it? How do we solve that problem? Well, you need a bigger point of view. You need to live in a bigger world. In fact, you need to live in 2 worlds. You need to go from 1 world to 2 worlds. What we're talking about is adding to the transactional world this place we call the flow world. So the transactional world is the world where we're getting stuff done. You know, it's the world of lines and arrows and schedules and outcomes and key performance indicators and grades and passing and commencement. All that stuff is transactional. It's all living mostly in the future, sometimes living in the past. How did it go? What did we learn? And now what do we need to get done in order to pull off this next outcome? It's where we spend in the modern world about 99% of our time, largely technologically facilitated and technologically accelerated. It's why most people think impact is the number 1, if not the only way, to achieve the experience of having a meaningful life. Because that's the one thing an outcome can be, is a meaningful impact. But it has all those other problems we identified. The flow world is what's actually happening in real time right now. It's the sum of all the movement, all the reality from the quantum space right up to your own conscious thought of what is happening in the present right here. The flow world is happening all the time, in real time, right below the transactional world. Now, you might say, wait a minute, isn't this just all in our heads? And the answer is absolutely. This is totally in your head. There is really only one world. The problem is your consciousness, as powerful as it is incapable of grokking the whole thing all at one time. So Lisa Miller at Columbia University, who's a neurophysiologist, has identified that the transactional world is managed by your achieving brain, largely your left brain, and the flow world is what is going on in your awakened brain. Now, the left brain, right brain model has been around a long time. We know a great deal more about it than we did 20 years ago, and it turns out to be a very important and very sophisticated thing. Jill Bolt Taylor, with a famous TED Talk, My Stroke of Insight, another neurologist who actually had a massive stroke, and the left side of her brain virtually completely died. She almost died, took her 8 years to recover, but she lived entirely out of her right brain for a brief period of time and found it was an incredibly different reality. So the truth is, this has been true for a long, long time, but right now we live in a time, what is different now is we are overwhelmingly driven by this transactional world. And that's a small world from a meaning point of view. The flow world has a lot more available to it, and we're trying to give you a chance to get back into that flow world by accessing that part of your brain. Now, what's the reframe on fulfillment? Well, if Maslow is wrong, where do we go from here? Well, it turns out he knew he was wrong. He had long suspected that that really wasn't the apex. Self-actualization wasn't the end of the story. So in truth, in his private notes, in his journals, he came up with another layer, which is self-transcendency. He never published it. Most people still think that Maslow believes the top is self-actualization. He doesn't. Some other people published this for him, but oddly enough, the old idea has mostly stuck. Many of you probably thought self-actualization was the end of the story. It's not. Turns out, the result of self-actualization, being me, trying to manifest all of me, is called fulfillment, which is all ego-driven. Whereas self-transcendency, when I have the experience of actually getting into something where I am part of what is bigger than me, whether that's a social construct, whether that's being blown away by the night sky, whether that's a mystical spiritual experience, of a variety of forms, being aware of the fact that you are now participating in something that's fundamentally bigger than you is what makes you feel more like you. It's kind of paradoxical. The best way to feel like you is to get someplace where it's bigger than you. And that self-transcendency, by the way, he's still wrong even when he had that idea because he made it hierarchical. It's not hierarchical. Meaning happens when you experience going beyond self, and it does not require having gone through levels 1 through 5 to get there. Anybody can do this. Even people who are still struggling to put food on the table can have an experience of self-transcendency. Can look across that table and realize, oh my gosh, my wife really does love me. My children really do like me. Why do they? That's completely mysterious to me. So anybody can have this experience. It's deeply human-making. Okay, so what we're really after, according to Joseph Campbell, in a famous interview with PBS years ago on a series called The Power of Myth, trying to really understand this meaning thing, says, what are we really after? What is it we're really after? What we're really after is not just the meaning-making as a transaction, but that experience, that feeling, the rapture of being alive. When is it you feel totally alive, totally present? Holy cow, I'm really here. I'm actually having the experience of being myself in the world, collaborating with others, and seeing what's going on around me. That's what people are really after. So the reframe on fulfillment is you can't be fulfilled the way most people define it. That's the good news, by the way, because you're way too big to be fulfilled. But you can become fully alive. In the present moment, in the flow world, not the transactional world, you can be fully alive in that thing that's going on right now if you're paying attention to it and willing to catch it. Most of the time, we let it go by. So the goal is become fully alive in the flow world a bunch more. Keep that impact stuff going, nothing wrong with that, but it's insufficient to build your life. Which means we want to get more out of the life that you're in, not have to cram more into it. This never enough, I need more, I'm not as happy as I want to be, not as fulfilled as I want to be, it's not as meaningful as I wanted it to be. Oh, I know, I need something else. No, you don't. You don't need more of it, You need more from it. The life you're already in, you're agonizing whether or not you picked the right major. You're not quite sure how you're going to tell your mom what that grade you just got back was. Whatever it might be, right in that moment, there's more aliveness waiting for you if you know how to extract it. And how do you do that? Well, first of all, you have to understand that it's time to celebrate the scandal of particularity. Okay, so you go to a Baptist college, here's our one theological moment right in the middle of the talk. The scandal of particularity is originally a theological construct, then became a philosophical construct. And what it is the observation that, oddly enough, there is no ultimate truth, beauty, love, compassion that we will ever experience in its fullness. You'll never get there. And yet everyone longs for that. So the scandalous thing is that, wait a minute, we're all seemingly naturally wired to long to be drawn toward these ultimates, and yet we're never going to get there. All we are going to get is these particular moments in time where there's a compromised possibility of something that looks kind of like beauty to me. You know, it looks reminiscent of the beauty I long to see, and it lasts for a little period of time in a particular space and moment, and then it's over. That's the particularity. And what's scandalous about it is that's as good as it gets, and oddly enough, it's more than enough. So understanding the scandal of particularity, that the fundamental nature of the universe is such that you are always drawn to these things of which you will never attain, you get to make a decision. You watch this gorgeous sunset. I was driving up the highway last night on the coast of Northern California on the way to the airport, absolutely drop-dead gorgeous sunset. And I get two choices. You know, because it ends in about 7 minutes, and I go, well, that was too short. Or it really wasn't perfect. There was one about a month ago, it was a little better. And I kind of go, nice try. So I can either go, not enough, not quite good enough, shoot, I'll try again tomorrow. Or, that was terrific. And let it be what it is, and accept its finitude, accept its constraint, accept its particularity, enjoy the fullness of it, and I'm coming back tomorrow. Because it's not over. That's a fundamental decision. You have to decide whether or not you're going to celebrate the constraint of particularity, one of which, by the way, is you. If you really are bigger than your own lifetime, you're not going to fully happen either. So you're going to enjoy the part of you that you allow out into the world as fully as you can, or you're going to worry about the part that never is going to get to make it. Look, I'm at an age where I've buried a bunch of people. Every single one of those people I buried that I knew really well was not done. But that doesn't mean there's regret. You have a life. Are you going to live it? Now, we've identified, and Mike even mentioned this, 4 moment-making opportunities, because it's in the moment that this occurs, where not a comprehensive definition of meaning-making, but 4 really hot spots where you can get a lot without much work, which are wonder, coherence, flow, and formative community. I don't have time to go into those in great detail, but wonder is that fundamental experience of something bigger than yourself, that sense of awe and mystery that actually expands your experience of the reality. Coherence is catching yourself in the act of actually living authentically in line with your values, which means, oh, I'm on the way to actually acting just like me. That's about as good as I get. That's a good experience to have. Flow, being deeply engaged in what you're actually doing, so you actually are enjoying what's occurring rather than merely trying to get through it so it's over with and done. And formative community, there are 3 reasons people get together. Social community, have a good time together. Collaborative community, get something done together. We do a lot of that here. And formative community, become better together. Bill and I will define that the shortest way to understand what a person is to simply say a person is a becoming. You are a becoming. I think that's the way God made us, is that we're constantly growing into our future selves. It was even true of Jesus. And Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. It's the end of Luke 2. It's an outrageous statement. Jesus grew. Perfect grows. Perfect isn't done. Perfect is just perfect at that time, then another time, then another time, then another time. So if it worked for Jesus, it might work for you. So we can grow into ourselves, and if we do that growing conversation, not transactionally, but really communally in what we call this formative community, that's an incredibly life-giving experience. And certainly something you can enjoy here while you're at CBU. So The high performer challenge, kind of get to some wrap-ups here. When you're in college, it's all about performance. It's all about learn a lot of stuff and give yourself an opportunity or what have you. And yet that runs into possibly graduating you as a massively transactionally minded person. So you could come out of here really good at a lot of stuff on one side of your reality as a person, as a soul, and as a brain, and as a body. You're basically half a person. That's a danger. You want and you deserve to have access to the full experience of being you. Now, this is a conversation, so my partner Bill and I were recently back east, and that's Bob Waldinger, who is a faculty member of the medical school at Harvard. So he's a practicing psychiatrist and the last project manager of the long-running Grant Harvard study, the Harvard study of adult behavior, the longest-running psychological study ever done in history. He was the final project manager of it, and he happens to be a Zen Buddhist master. Interesting guy. We had a conversation, and there's a clip I'm about to play for you that hopefully we can hear, where Bob is talking about an issue that relates to this particular opportunity of living out of not just your transactional brain and life, but also your flow brain and life, which he talks about as being extrinsic motivation, the external world, and intrinsic motivation, the internal world, that has an important implication that you might want to know about.
There's been some psychology research, which I bet you guys know, about extrinsic motivators versus intrinsic motivators. So extrinsic motivators are, you know, the shiny badges of achievement that we all go after. I made this difference in the world, right? And the intrinsic motivators are, I love doing this. I just care about this activity.
I can't not do this.
Right. And one of the things they find is that when we respond constantly to extrinsic motivators, we lose touch with our intrinsic motivators. We lose touch with those signals, those embodied signals of this lights me up, this energizes me, this makes me feel warm inside, that we lose that. And so one of the problems with responding to being one of those high achievers who responds to those external motivators is that we lose touch with an element of our soul. If
We've numbed
to
ourselves.
get spiritual, we get numbed to that, and we can re-engage that. We can start listening again to those internal signals.
Yeah. So the challenge is that living the mostly transactional life is a little lumpy and you'd like it to be more interesting. It's actually more dangerous than that. The longer you don't attend to your awakened brain, the longer you don't attend to participating in the fullness of the present moment, in what we call the flow world, if you do that for too long, the part of your consciousness, the part of your psyche that has the capacity to even detect those signals and those experiences begins to atrophy. You'll literally become less human. So what you want to do is you want to get into the place where you really have an appetite for that, because you are making your old self now. Literally, when I was exactly your age, I was a sophomore at Stanford, I'm 19 years old, I'm in a meeting, and a guy looking like me, he had a longer gray beard, and I've got a short gray beard, and he said, you probably think when you're older, you'll be a really sweet person and people want to talk to you. And he says, not a chance. He says, you don't get better with age. You just stop having the energy to put up all that stuff, faking that you're nicer than you look. He said, that person you are when you're all by yourself and nobody's watching you, that's who you really are. And that's who you're going to get to be when you're an older person. Be very careful. You're making the old people of tomorrow by today's choices. And so literally, while you're even here at CBU, 18 to 22 years old for most undergraduates, you are already setting in place the momentum, the orientation, and the mindsets that will have everything to do with what you look like when you're as freaking old as I am. And trust me, I know this. So I teach in the Stanford Distinguished Careers Institute, the gap year for grown-ups. Anybody from 45 to 90 can come for a year if you've got a big enough paycheck. It's really expensive. And ridiculous, but there you go. That's the Stanford brand. And most of them are, 55 to 75, what we used to call retirement age, rethinking what to do with the rest of their lives. And they only can get in if they've had a distinguished career. Now, they're not all rich. I mean, some of them are nonprofit educators and people like that. But they've all had these very powerful careers to be interesting people. And now they want to go do something different with their lives. And they spend a year thinking about that. And I've been working with these people about 10 years, about 9 cohorts. And I sat in with one group for a couple of years, and a bunch of the alums, so they'd already spent a year together working on this thing. And then about a year goes by, and the alums came in for an event at Stanford, and a bunch of them got together and had pizza and beer over at somebody's house near the campus, and I was invited to sit in. And 22 of these alums sat in a circle for 2.5 hours, every person answering the question, how's it going? How's it going after the program? Because they all left and they wanted to live it a somewhat different kind of a way. And they all said, 18 out of the 20 people there were 2 of us who were observers, 20 alums, 18 of the 20 alums, a year and a half in, after a year at Stanford, 2.5 years after stopping what they were doing, were saying, I'm really struggling. You know, that being the VP of whatever, you know, that running that organization, it really worked for me, and it doesn't work for me anymore, but I'm just struggling with inventing myself differently. There was all this muscle memory, all this momentum in being a person who lived out getting stuff done, who was known for that, who enjoyed that, who thrived on the feedback loop of the affirmation and the accolades and the awards and the money, all the stuff that comes with getting stuff done. And shifting gears was really hard, and they were really struggling. Now, the good news is another 2 years goes by. It's about 4 years after they graduate. They got together at somebody else's house, same questions, same 20 people, and almost all of them said, I'm finally starting to figure it out. But we're talking 5 years in. So don't make it that hard on yourself. Start making that shift now. You can be a both-and person starting today. It's challenging going from role to soul. By role, I'm mostly defined by my role. I'm a student at CBU. I'm going to be an entry-level worker at Dell Computer. I'm going to be a whatever. That's who I primarily am. Those are good things to be. Don't let that be all of who you are. So 2 moment-making tools, 2 ways you can start tapping into the experience of the life you're already in and not spending all of your time being in the future. First of all, just change your vowel. By the way, there's 21 tools in the book. So there's 3 big reframes, 5 mindsets, 4 categories of opportunity for meaning making, and 21 separate tools in each of those 4 categories. So there's got to be something in there you can use. Here's 2 of them. Really simple. Go from got to get to. There's a to-do list. I still use a Post-it note. The best thing that happens to a to-do list item is what? Crossing it off. Exactly. Which means it's over. So what do you want? You want it to be over. Okay. So what's the goal? Let's be dead. It's over. Okay. I don't think so. How about I get to go to the staff meeting and hear what might be changing in the company. I get to take the trash out so the house doesn't stink and is full of bugs. I get to sit down and have dinner with my friends and find out what their day was like. As opposed to, I got to get some dinner because I got to back in and got to finish that assignment. You start living everything got to, it's all over before it even starts. You're never even there. How many of you look down at the plate and it's empty and wonder who ate your food? Okay, got to show up. So just go from got to get to. Thing 1. Thing 2, put on your wonder glasses. So wonder we define as the combination of curiosity plus mystery equals wonder. Herman Miller, the playwright, wrote, I have a theory that the moment one gives close attention to anything, even a blade of grass, it becomes a mysterious, awesome, indescribably magnificent world in itself. I have tried this experiment 1,000 times, and I have never been disappointed. Can you learn how to deeply pay attention to what's in front of you to the point of noticing the wonder in it? So you can look at anything, and we do 3 quick passes. Do the normal look, do the curious look, and do the wondering look. So, okay, I'm looking at these panels. Curious look, wonder what that's about. Interesting color scheme, I wonder why they went so pale. Because what's going to happen is your transaction brain is going to interrogate naturally and come up with to-do items or critiques. You can't stop your brain from doing that, so just let that happen. Okay, so that's the normal look. Now the curious look is, what are they after here? Oh, there's this thing that they're trying to promote with students to think more deeply about some of these questions about, follow the light, not the mirror. Ooh, that's kind of, what's that mean? I'm curious what they mean by that. And then the third look would be like, so what's even further, what's the wonder like? Wow, I wonder what's going on in the leadership of a college that funds this. I wonder if any students' lives will be changed because of a conversation one of those posters provoked. And where might it have gone? Isn't it amazing? We affect one another. Where we look matters. Huh. Now that's about 37 seconds. And I go from what's with the pale colors to, wow, why are we here? That's available almost anywhere, almost anytime, in less than a minute. But you have to train your attention. So, formative community, I'm going to briefly describe, and then I'm way over time, I'm sure. If a person is a becoming, don't get stuck in the human being, human doing duality problem. You start with who you are, a human being. Go and do stuff. But take notes and see what you're learning. That means you're becoming. Now that becomes a virtuous cycle, not a vicious duality. And if that's true, then find a community which is a gathering of intent, not content. Oh, let's get together with all the climate change people. Let's get together with all the hedge fund people. Let's get together with all the graphic arts people. That's content-related gathering, whether it's social or collaborative. Let's get together with all the people who are asking an important question about what they're trying to learn and why. Who's growing into what college means to them? Those are becoming questions. Doesn't have to be about the same topic, it has to be about the same intention. So when you're in a community of people who are living into the question of intentionality and who they're becoming, not what they're doing, the conversation is entirely different. It turns out, engaging with other people who are trying to move into harmonic relationship with themselves, or themselves and God, can activate your own life. So that person, finding out who they're trying to be in the climate change movement, actually turns you on relative to your thinking about deciding to go into therapy, becoming a counselor, despite the fact that those contents have nothing to do with each other. But Anna becoming Anna helps Carlos become Carlos. All Anna has to do is the Anna thing well and listen in on the Carlos thing. So that conversation is one you can have with anybody willing to be on the same page about what our intent are. And it's very generative. So what are we doing here in college? Well, when we teach this stuff, there's three classic answers. We're here for the life of the mind, the liberal education, for career readiness, or to find yourself. Now, which one of those you're at? Most of you are here for career readiness, is my guess. That's the most popular thing these days. But what I'm telling you now is one thing you don't want to leave campus without doing is not finding yourself, but finding your way. So the book ends with this idea, which is, in the conclusion, we say, if you add up all these ideas and tools and assemble them into a life practice, what you have is what philosophers call a way, a course, or a mode of living. We almost titled the book The Designer's Way, but chose not to, because that sounds like we're telling you our way is the right way and ought to be your way. That's wrong. We say this to make clear we're not recommending you live by the way of design, or the way of Bill, or the way of Dave. Each of us must find our own way. We can learn from others and even participate in an established way like Buddhism or Christianity or Bushido, but ultimately we must choose our way and make our way through life by it. So what I'm strongly recommending is, now begins the real work, that of making your way. So my admonition to you is, while you're at CBU, don't just make a career, don't just make a competency, make a way. Learn how to dive more deeply into the meaningful experience of the life that you're already in. Don't wait until it all comes together, because it doesn't ever all come together. You're never going to stop growing. And if you do that, you can start extracting more meaning from life all along the way, which will give you deeper insight to actually finding the things that really matter to you. And as you make your way, not just the what, not just the how, but the why. It matters. Good luck. Thank you for your time.
Stand in the middle.
Okay, that's right.
Thank you, Dave.
Whoop.
Is this on? There we go. Okay.
There we go. Okay.
Thank you. I hope that you are all as energized as I am. That was great. I would love to continue the conversation, but I think that's Tay's job. So
Yeah.
So I will present you with this award. Dave, we are presenting you with the University Writing Center, California Baptist University, the 2026 Distinguished Public Lecturer Award for cultivating purpose-driven writers, communicators, and influencers. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Can we come up? Okay, thank you. We in the right place? Okay.
Get everybody in.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, let's go.
All right.
They're still watching.
They're still watching. They're still here. Well, we're so grateful for your talk today. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Tae Sung. I am the Dean of the Office of Student Success. And in the Office of Student Success, we talk about our mission as being all about what we call our 3 C's, right? Which is classroom, commencement, calling. And we want to empower students to be able to succeed in the classroom, move toward commencement, and ultimately prepare for their calling. Now, a lot of times when we talk about that 3rd C, about the importance of calling, most students think that we're talking about career. They think we're talking about the job. They're thinking about getting the degree and moving on from there.
Right.
But today, what you're trying to do is really push us to think, to define that. Like, that way of thinking about our calling is what you say transactional.
Yeah.
Right? And there's another world beyond that. That's what you call is the flow state.
Yep.
And it's about self-transcendence, getting beyond ourselves, outside of ourselves. What I want to know a little bit, Dave, is I'd love to hear a personal story. Right?
Okay.
Can you share an experience for yourself personally when you've had to transition from that transactional world of accomplishment, of impact, of fulfillment? When did you come to this realization that that's not enough for you and that you had to turn to something more transcendent?
Well, I'll tell kind of a meager story. So I found myself in the high-tech industry. I tried to be in the advanced energy technology industry 35 years before it started. That turned out not to work very well. It's very hard to get a job in an industry that doesn't exist. And so I fell into high-tech, and I'm going along doing that, and then I fell into startups. But I really cared about my family. I was a young dad, and I really, really wanted to be a good dad because I didn't have one. My father died when I was 9, and we later learned he died of suicide. So I was fatherless, and that was important to me. And yet, all I was doing was working all the time. So I was a complete workaholic and had no idea that that was true of me. I found out the hard way, and I couldn't fix it. No matter how hard I tried, I would still end up looking up, and it was 9 o'clock at night, and I'm still at my desk. And then what happened was my mother started dying of cancer, and I took a year off at the end of her life because she'd done everything for us, my sisters and myself, and we thought the least we can do is help her die well, which we did, and we had no regrets about that. So I took some time off, and then I came back out of that, and that gave me enough of a break. So I was forced by circumstance to stop long enough to take a look at what I was doing. And what I realized, I was just simply failing miserably. And I finally concluded to live with the particularity of myself, like, look, Dave, by the time you figure this out, the kids are going to be gone. They're going to be in college by the time you learn how to come home at time.
How old were you when you started to have this realization?
Well, I was struggling with it from about 27 till about 35, and struggling with it hard, and I just failed miserably. Then 37 to 38 was the year that my mom was dying of cancer. My mom was 72, and I was 38 when she died. And so I'd stopped out, and that stop out forced me to take a look, and then I chose to accept the transition of, maybe I just can't handle too big a responsibility. So a friend of mine said, why don't you try contracting? So I went independent. I became an unemployed marketing guy, a gig worker, we would now call it. And the thing about gig work is when the contract is over, you have to stop working because the money's gone. And so I actually never learned how to grow up and manage myself. I let my clients do it for me. The only way I would stop is if they stopped paying me. And then they say, go home, we don't want you here anymore. So I would be sent home from my client because they ran out of money, and then I would see my kids awake. And it worked great. So the transformation there was in accepting my own finitude. Then I was much more effective. I was much more helpful to those clients than I ever was to my employers, where I was overworking and killing myself. I was a far better dad, far better, family man. And so somehow going down, what I thought was giving up being an executive in a large corporation, turned out to be the only way that I could actually experience the fullness of being present to what I was good at. I was trying to be, Parker Palmer has a great line in one of his books. I suddenly realized I was doing a very noble job of living somebody else's life. And I was doing a noble job of living somebody else's life. And so accepting my own weaknesses opened everything up.
And Dave, if I'm understanding you correctly, that kind of crisis of meaning is not a matter of if. That's a matter of a when.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That sooner or later, we're going to have to confront our limitations, right? Let's say some of us are built and wired for achievement,
Yeah.
right? And maybe some of us enjoy that hamster hedonic treadmill
Yeah.
that you talked about of going from accomplishment to accomplishment,
Sure.
right? Going from impact to impact, the promotion to promotion. And that may draw some of us, but you're saying at a certain point, we're going to run into a limitation there.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who seem to be charmed and they just never fell off the bike, but I wonder what was going on there. There's the question of you mentioned calling.
Yes, yeah.
And, in my theology and my understanding of what calling really is and why does God set us up to be called anyway? I mean, the same God who, helped invent bromeliads, those are air-breathing plants, right? I mean, air-breathing plants, they go to work going, okay, we're good. We could be that. I mean, what's with all this work stuff? What's with all this challenge? What's with, making the world a better place? Well, I think, God is inviting us to co-participate in this thing called creation. Yeah. We get to play along. And so then I wonder are we here for the work or is the work here for us? And for a long, long time, I really thought we're here, I've been sent to do the work. I've been sent to solve the energy crisis. I've been sent to, make life design part of the educational reform movement. It's all about the work. And I think the work matters. But increasingly, it turns out if I'm subjecting myself to it, the work also shows my limitations, cracks me open to the next growth that I need in humility to recognize. So for a long time, I thought I'm here for the work. And increasingly, I'm wondering whether or not the work is here for us. The work is given to us that we might be made into a more full representation of what God had in mind. And now I think it's just this incredibly paradoxical dance, but it's about both. We're not here just to do the work, we're here to be formed by the work. And if you let that happen to you, you're probably going to get some surprises.
And that kind of formation is not something that happens in a one-time transformation.
No.
Right?
You're not a transaction. You're an ongoing biological reality.
And this event is hosted by the University Writing Center. And part of the reason why we have this event is because we want to connect the dots between why writing is important, not just for your assignments, right? But for you to learn how to write and clearly and persuasively is going to somehow help you in this thing called drafting life. And part of what you've been talking about, reframing some of these dysfunctional beliefs that maybe a lot of times we have in our society, is about the process of revision and thinking about our lives as a kind of a paper that we're drafting over and over again. And how do you see that connection between reframing and revision?
Well, and writing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll answer this differently than you're anticipating because it's not about career stuff. Writing was probably the critical catalytic function in what unequivocally was the most important growth year of my life, which is the year after my wife died. So 5 years ago, my wife, Claudia, got cancer and died 9 months later, 15 years ahead of schedule. She was just barely 70 when she died. And we had a fabulous, intimate marriage, wonderful marriage. And it was bone-crushingly hard to lose her, bone-crushing. But I wrote my way through it. We had started a blog. We're a very candid group of people. And so she lived very out loud during the year she was dying. And a whole bunch of people showed up to the website we did that on, like a whole bunch of people we didn't even know. And that turned out to be an important ministry. So I said, well, maybe I'll write my way through the grief. And I wrote my way through the grief. And the writing, I mean, I really wrote my way through it in ways that were completely surprising.
Do you mean like journaling? Like how did?
No, I was blogging publicly, yeah.
yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
a public blog with about 15, it wasn't every day by any means, about 15 or 20 entries. And what the writing forced me to do, I think what any writing, because writing is a particular, there's no way to say what you mean. You can only say what's sayable. So I was trying to write my experience of grief, which is this huge, ineffable thing that I didn't even begin to understand. So the mere act of writing, I said, I gave myself permission to try to say what I could say and try to distill down these, I mean, wonderfully awful, intense experiences. It was love in a whole new way. The best year of my marriage is the year after she died. I learned so much. Now it's just love in a form called pain. But pain's the price, not the point. People avoid the pain, and in so doing, they miss the gift. So the pain was very educational if I was willing to pay attention to it. And then write what the pain was trying to say to me. And I knew I was wrong, but I chose to accept this is true enough. And then the second thing was, and if that's true enough about what the pain is saying, then if I just respond to that, if I try to deal with that or grow with that or accept that, that's enough. And so step by step by step, and then a year out, I had been profoundly changed by the experience. And the writing forced it, because the writing made it be not the whole thing, but a real thing. And one real thing and another real thing and another real thing in a row ended up becoming transformative.
Connect the dots for us, right? I mean, we anticipate that someday we will have to, right, for better or for worse, encounter these types of challenges, write our way through, revise and redraft, right, the meaning of our lives. But connect the dots for our students here and now, right,
Okay.
18 to 21, right? They're right now, going through college, trying to figure out, I gotta get past this class. I got to get to graduation. I got to get the job. And you're talking about all that as being part of the transactional life. How do they practice that kind of writing and meaning making now? I know you talked a little bit about the got to, the get to, and some of these things, but connect the dots for our students in the audience.
Well, I think just a little bit is have some practices that allow you to tap into the fullness of your life right now. So it's not all thinking about those outcomes. When you're done writing the paper, when read it. Actually read the thing you wrote and go, oh, I mean, I had to do one of my first podcasts, and I reread the conclusion of our book, and I was brought to tears and went, oh, this is pretty good. This isn't, I wonder who wrote this, and give yourself a chance to even notice what you're doing, for heaven's sakes. You don't have to go add something else. There's experience available to you in the midst of what you're already doing. Try to find a couple of other people that you can talk with, students, where the conversation isn't, well, what are you doing, and how's that test, and how's spring break, and did you stay up all night watching, Game of Thrones again? Skip that conversation until and along the way, what questions are arising for you? What are you learning about yourself? What are you hoping for? The bigger questions, the existential questions, the interior questions. You don't have to answer them, just give them some airtime, for heaven's sakes. So that part of you is being paid attention to, and then it can pay attention to the world around you and notice things you would not notice had you not been feeding that part of who you really are. That doesn't have to take a lot of time, but build it into the practice. Allow yourself to be that person, and then more will be revealed.
Yeah. I think this is such a powerful concept of pausing to not just get to the next destination, the next achievement, but how do you learn to make meaning along the way? And when you talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, that somehow self-actualization is something that we'll never achieve, but we got to get to self-transcendence. Could you tell us a little bit more about even the way that you've experienced self-transcendence, right? You've talked about your own, the pain of your losing your wife, and maybe talk to us a little bit about your faith. In previous conversations, you and I have talked about the importance of John 10:10, about having life and life abundantly, the kind of life that Christ calls us to. Could you share what that means to you?
Well, I'll give you a metaphor. So Dallas Willard, sadly now long dead, he died in his 50s. He was the former chair of philosophy at University of Southern California. He was a ranking philosopher, a Quaker Christian, a very deep and thoughtful guy, writes extensively on spiritual disciplines and spiritual practice. And he was giving a big talk with the Veritas Forum at Stanford many years ago, a large room like this. And he wasn't sounding quite Christian enough for some of the conservatives in the room. And some young woman asked him a question that was clearly, hey, tell him the gospel, Dallas, was what the question really meant. And he stopped, he was walking across the deck, and he stopped, and he pivoted, he goes, look, it's not about Christianity. It's just about the truth. Jesus would be the first person to tell you, if you can find something truer than Christianity, go there. Okay? Are we clear? Now, that was a radical kind of a thing to say. But the point is, early on in life, I started wondering how the world works right after my father died. So I started, thinking deeply about, gee, I'm on my own, what do I do now? Mom was there, the family was fine, but for some reason I found myself thinking, I got to figure this out at the age of 10. And so the God question comes up, and I was a sort of vague theist, like most, nice young white people I knew. Grew up in the suburbs, went to the church, kind of thing. They did the flannel graph, and I bought into. It looked to me like there was something more going on than met the eye. So the theism thing was there, and I just kept leaning into the question. I was just letting the question lean in. And if you do that, and you actually respond to what you've noticed, and you keep doing that, that process will continue. So another mode of transcendence for me was I'm doing youth work. I was an elder in the church, and I was taught taught Sunday school and coached Little League and all that kind of stuff. And I'm standing in front of a room of about 80 junior high kids, and I'm teaching the Sermon on the Mount. Which includes be anxious for nothing. Look at the birds of the sky and the lilies of the field. They're not worried. What are you worried about? And Lowen Baumgarten, bless his heart, says, Dave, what does that mean? Be anxious for, it means don't worry. About what? I think about anything. Really? When? Ever? Holy cow, Dave, really? Don't worry about anything ever? That's what Jesus is saying? I think that's what he's saying, Lowen. One more question, what's that? How does that work, Dave? And literally, I'm standing in front of 80 kids, I'm an elder in the church, and I might even be thought, it doesn't work. I have no idea how this works. I had fallen into being a good Christian, and I had completely lost track of what the gospel was actually offering me. And I still don't know what I said to the 80 kids, because I'm sure I said something other than, holy cow, it doesn't work. That would have been embarrassing. But, and that was an absolute moment of crisis for me. So I had leaned into my Christianity to a point where I was just behaving it. I was doing churchianity really well, but I'd left the God part out. And suddenly, and I was desperate, and that begat a 6-year search that finally ends up, in an all-night prayer session at a monastery 22 miles south of Big Sur 6 years later. But the point being, if a question arises in you that wants your soul's attention, don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Even if it's upsetting, it wants your good. Don't let it go.
What a powerful conversation. And I think, one of the things that I would love for all of us to take away from this conversation is that finding meaning in your life is not an achievement. It's not an assignment. It's not something we do one time, or it is an ongoing life process. It sounds like it's a kind of spiritual discipline that requires a formative community of people.
The early Christians were known as the followers in the way.
Yeah.
The term Christian was actually slang. It was what the Romans called them. It's Roman for Jesus freak. Like those guys, those Christian guys. There's those Christy people, whatever. That was a negative moniker. They never called themselves that. They called themselves followers in the way. There is no getting there. There's just going. It's all going.
Will you thank me, for Dave Evans, for joining us today for this conversation? Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
We want to encourage you, before you leave, to make sure you check out some of the displays and some of the material that's out here for you. This Mere Creativity campaign out of the College of Architecture, Visual Arts, and Design is meant to provoke us to think about more deeply about the meaning of what it means to create and partner with the God of who creates all things. And so we're going to have Dean Dirk Dallas come join us up on the stage to close us out in a word of prayer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Would you pray with me? Heavenly Father, ultimate creator, ultimate designer, thank you for this wonderful time together. Thank you for Dave and him coming here and spending some time with us this afternoon, inspiring us, challenging us, encouraging us. Thank you for the gifts that you've given him, the opportunities that he's able to experience through this world, and we pray for his continued platform, that it would continue to be a blessing to others and continue to bring glory to you. Lord, we thank you for the examples, the ideas that were shared. We thank you for the questions that were raised. And help us to see these things as important to our purpose here. And help us to remember that we are all charged with supernatural meaning that is found in you. So, Lord, I pray for every student here, across every major, every calling, that you'd give them clarity as they think and pray about their future. Give them courage to take meaningful steps, even when the path might not be clear. And I ask that you guard them from measuring their worth through just achievement or title or status, and instead that you would ground them in your truth, in your purpose, and who you have created them to be. So, Lord, we thank you. We look to you. May we delight in you. We pray this all in your name. Amen.